Hey guys! So here I am tonight. I'll introduce myself again just in case I haven't. My name is Lindsay Bourne and I created the Mindful Living Movement to share a few different things. So my love of healthy movement practices, primarily yoga and hoop dance. And yoga has just created such an awareness of like what I consume, what I eat, where things come from, that I have really gone like fully into gardening. I love the meditation of digging in the dirt. I love the presence that it comes from just spending time outside or working with my indoor houseplants, and that's kind of just spiraled, and now here I am trying to just kind of share all the little tidbits of knowledge and stuff like that I've accumulated over the years with you guys. So tonight we are talking about how to start seeds in the house. So indoor seed starting for your garden outside. And I'm in zone 3, so pretty cold climate, which means right at about like May 15th is roughly our last frost date. It fluctuates a little bit, like we've had frost even June 1st, so you always have to kind of pay attention for a few weeks even after, but roughly May 15th is what I'm shooting for as my last frost date for when I can start to put things outside right into the ground. But inside I am starting a whole bunch of seeds. I've got all of my seed packets. I've read on the back about, they say start 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks prior to your last frost date. So you just Google, find out your zone, find out your last frost date, and then you count backwards. And I write right on the packets, 2nd week of March, 3rd week of March, 1st week of April, so on and so forth, so that it's really super easy. I just grab the packet that I need to seed. I've got all of my stuff sort of neatly tucked away in the living room here, dining room, that I can just kind of start to set everything up. So I've got these are my 2nd week March, which we're slightly farther into March, but you really don't want to start seeds too much earlier than the recommended date. Indoors is a very challenging growing environment. You don't have natural predators, you don't have the wind, you don't have the same sun. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. Usually it's maybe not enough heat for germination, or fungus, like fungal diseases from too much moisture, also legginess of a plant. So the plants, they grow super, super tall and skinny, and then they fall over. Means they're reaching for the sun. They aren't getting what they need to develop like a really strong, healthy plant. So those are kind of the main ones. So the shorter time that you can be growing indoors equals basically less risk of things going wrong. And last year I got very ambitious and I started things maybe about 2 weeks earlier than I needed to, and most everything was just fine. However, I was growing a lot of funky heirloom tomato varieties, and the heirloom tomatoes, some of them don't have quite the disease resistance, obviously, than like the genetically modified ones do. So I had some fungal diseases that took out a considerable amount of my tomato plants last year. So this year I have tried really, really hard to not jump the gun, and I'm sticking to exactly what the packets are telling me, just to make sure that I try and maximize my success in everything that I need to do. So what I'm going to do is just kind of talk you guys through starting a bunch of the seeds that I've got here. I did start a bunch of stuff last week, and I've got quite a selection of different things to plant in. So like these guys are super great. I really love these just because they got like super tiny little squares, which when the plant starts to outgrow these, it's easy to pull the little plug out and stick it into something larger. So it's a very easy transplant. Because more than likely the things that I'm starting right now, they're going to need to be upgraded a size of pot before I actually put them in the dirt outside, just because it's now the 2nd week in March and I've got to get them all the way till May roughly 15th before I can actually stick them in the ground. That's quite a bit of time for a plant to stay in something this size. But when you're starting, you don't want to go to that biggest size because you're going to end up with too much moisture, because the roots they need time to develop before they have a really robust plant. So these guys I got from a lady, actually. I just had put a wanted ad on garage sale, looking for seed starting pots, looking for trays, these nice big trays, and yeah, I got a lady, she had a pile of these, all uniform, which makes my life super easy. As you can see, it just sits like super nice all together in these trays. I only got a few of the trays from her. These guys I bought, I think it was PV Mart, Canadian company, but like Walmart, all sorts of places have these trays, and you have to buy the lids separately, unfortunately, but they have these really great lids that sit on top, and you can see this one's actually kind of steamy. Like they keep the moisture in and help create that really awesome greenhouse effect to get your seeds going. So these are what I use for the most of what I grow. I just find that they fit on my shelves really nice, and overall they're not that expensive. I mean, they might be like maybe $4 for like one of these trays. They're gonna last you a really long time if you take care of them. I have purchased from the dollar store before. You can buy these things and you pick them up, they fall apart. There's no way that something holding a whole bunch of dirt, like you have to quite support the things underneath. And some of them have holes, like the drip trays that are supposed to keep water from leaking everywhere. They don't, they've got holes all over the place. So spend the extra couple bucks if you can, or just get really creative. Maybe use like old food TV trays. I've seen people use like the trays from like a mall food court. They got their hands on a bunch that were being cleared out of. Like you can get really creative with different things that have good structure that are going to hold water. Old dinner plates. I've actually got a bunch of plants that are just sitting on old dinner plates that I got for free instead of buying plastic. You know, as much as possible, I try not to use plastic. Some cases it's just, you just kind of have to go with it. It's going to make life easier in the long run. But if you want to not have to spend a whole bunch of money, just look for those really creative other ways that you can do things. Old casserole dishes, old like cookie sheets, for example, that maybe are like rusted and not something you want to put food on anymore. Those are really great. And a lot of times all it takes is a wanted ad online. Hey, who has old ones of whatever? I would love to take them off your hands, and you'll get a ton of messages. I've done that for all sorts of things, bigger pots, you name it. And as far as seed starting stuff too, I've got a few different things, like toilet paper rolls I've never done specifically toilet paper rolls, but these guys I feel like are going to be really great for tomatoes. Tomatoes tend to put down a really long root system quite quickly, and they also grow quite tall, so these are going to be really great for that, and I've been kind of accumulating some. This is a raspberry container, which is also really great. It's got holes in the bottom, which is key, and it does have holes in the top. I might hide the holes in the top with some tape just to keep the moisture in, but it comes with a pre-made lid, little greenhouse lid. You've got a fairly shallow dish, which is good for seed starting. You just have to know that the more shallow it is, the quicker you're going to have to transplant into something a little bit deeper to give it the root system that it needs, also to be able to keep a consistent moisture. The more shallow and less dirt just means you really got to be on top of your watering and be really careful, but these guys are really great. Also, my onions. I started onions last weekend. You can see all my little onions have popped up. This is just a mushroom tray that I took a filleting knife and I just poked a whole bunch of holes in the bottom with a filleting knife. And this is my onion seed starting tray. And they will eventually outgrow this, but it'll be quite some time. Like, I gave them like a decent amount of space, you might be able to see. And you just, once they do need to be separated, you just very, very gently use like maybe a spoon, get underneath and just lift. And I haven't packed the soil very much, like the soil is quite loose, so that when I do start to like separate these guys and eventually put them into something with bigger spacing, I can just tease them apart and then retransplant them when I need to start doing my separating. So these guys are great. Like, I've got quite a deep dish here, so my onions should be fine in this for a while. And you wouldn't want to go too much deeper than this, but we eat a lot of mushrooms, so those guys are handy that way. And yeah, so I'm gonna start with, I've got a whole bunch of seed starting mix in here. And it is important that you're using seed starting mix as opposed to just regular potting mix. Potting mix usually has compost and nutrients and stuff like that in it, but when you're starting seeds, you don't want a very nutrient dense soil. You actually want a really poor nutrient soil. so that your plants don't get super overwhelmed. And also you want the plant to have to send roots down and search for the nutrients, which is why your seed starting mix is really not got a lot in it. It's also quite a fine texture, which usually this I just pulled out of my seed starting mix, and that's like a whole big tree almost. That shouldn't be in there, and you wouldn't want to leave that in there. So if you find any pieces like that, just take them out. But yeah, sometimes I mix up a bunch of different things. So perlite, peat moss, maybe some vermiculite, things that are very light and airy but have like a nice small particle to them, that's what you want to use. And you want to pre-moisten your soil. So I do have a fair bit of soil in my little bucket here. Got my little fun watering can. And this is actually probably going to be a decent amount of water I'm actually going to need, surprisingly, for this soil that I've got. You want the texture to be almost as if you were to squeeze a sponge, and it, like the drop of water almost wants to come out of it if you were to squeeze it hard enough. That's how much water you're looking for, which is quite a lot. Like, I can already tell you just mixing this that I haven't put enough moisture in here, but I'm just going to give it a little bit just to spread it around and just find out kind of where I'm at. Now, the reasoning for making sure that your moisture is in the soil first is, one, that you actually know you've saturated your soil all the way top to bottom. Two, that more than likely you actually won't need to water again until your seeds sprout, which is the case with the ones that I started last weekend. I'll show you guys these here actually. This is my tray from last weekend, and you can kind of see those like lighter spots. Those just showed up today, and that was last Saturday. Today is Friday. Those just showed up today from my soil starting to dry out, and a lot of them have just started to sprout up, which is really good, so I don't have to worry about like pouring dirt on the soil and then washing my seed away and stuff like that. And with that moisture in the soil, you get that nice greenhouse effect happening inside your little tray. Now, if you don't have like a clear tray top, you could use like, say, saran wrap, for example, or something like that. You do want to have something that's going to allow the sun to get in if you're not using, say, like a heat mat. Seeds don't germinate with sunlight, they germinate with heat. So you need to let the sun in to get to the soil, or else you need to have like a heat mat underneath, or maybe a refrigerator or some sort of an appliance that is generating a fair bit of heat. Register you maybe could use, you need to be careful because the air is obviously going to dry it out, but usually a windowsill and sun is going to be everything that you need. And on cloudier days and stuff like that, you're obviously not going to get the heat of the sun, but it just means that your seeds are going to take longer to germinate. Possibly there's different seeds that, like your peppers and your corn, tomatoes, they do like to have a pretty consistent high temperature. So if you're wondering why, like last year, for example, I had seeded my peppers and we had, I think it was a good week of cloud. And so my peppers they germinated terribly. Like, I got some, but not near what I wanted to. So like once I noticed that was actually happening, I reseeded a whole bunch of peppers. And fortunately, we had a whole bunch of sun. I had great consistent heat, and so I ended up with like a crap load of peppers. I did have to reseed though last year to get the number of peppers that I actually really wanted. This year, we've had a ton of overcast days, and so I decided that it was time. I started enough stuff in the house. It was time for me to invest in a seed mat, and I bought one for, I don't know, pretty reasonable price off of Amazon, I think, with a timer and the whole works. It was like $50, which, you know, for starting all the seeds that are going to go in my garden, it's time. I was ready to make that investment, but it's not a requirement, definitely not. So these trays, I'm not going to pack the soil super tight. I'm just going to kind of pile some on here and then just kind of gently knock it back and forth until it falls kind of into the crevices. The less you pack it, the better. It just gives the roots more structure, more air and stuff like that. Also is going to move around in there, so I'm just going to lightly kind of pack it like that. And taking my gloves off, because I don't find that working with gloves ever goes very well when you're trying to work with seeds. At some point, sometimes I try to put only one seed in a hole, but every once in a while I might do like 2 seeds just to kind of increase my odds, because not every single seed is going to germinate for you, unfortunately. That's just how it goes. So I've got some ground cherries is what I'm going to start here. And then a little extra packet. So these guys I am going to see if I can just put one seed per hole, and you know, if they don't end up germinating really well, I can definitely start them again in a couple of weeks, but I don't use anything fancy besides my fingers. So just dropping 1 seed into each of them. Oops, that one got a couple. And if you do end up going overboard and you end up with too many seeds and all the seeds germinate, also having your soil not packed super tight is going to help you when you do start to kind of tease apart the little seedlings. Like you'd pull it out and you just, sometimes with the soil as loose as it is, you just kind of give it like just the lightest little touch and the soil just falls right apart and you can see the whole seedling and everything. And then you've got it and you just kind of gently place it into its next little pot or whatever that it's ready for. So I've got roughly 1 seed in each. There's probably a couple of extras. And then I'm just going to take a little bit more soil, and it's wet so it doesn't really sprinkle too nicely, but I'm just going to put just the tiniest little bit. Oops, there's a big stick again. And just kind of gently spread it around. And you do want to give that top layer just like a soft little pat, just so your seeds kind of are they're almost like tucked in. I'm not shoving my fingers and packing it down. I'm just giving them like a nice little, almost like I'm putting them to bed. And yeah, definitely label. Don't ever think that you're gonna remember what is what. Some stuff is super distinct, but maybe you plant a couple of varieties. I use, as you can see here, I use popsicle sticks. I like that they're wood and there's these fun colored ones that you can get, and I just write on there and use as many of those guys as you need to, because you're probably going to forget, especially it's mid-March right now and I'm going to put these guys in the soil in May. They're also going to get transplanted probably one more time as I separate them from one to the next. So that's what one of these guys looks like, and I've got a lot more to work on here to get planted, and I'll keep you guys up to date on how all the progress and everything goes. But so far so good. I'm feeling good about everything I planted last week. My heat mat, I would say, definitely boosted success. I had probably on day 3 my Phacelia, which is just a nice fun flower. That was the very first one to poke up. And my purple basil actually poked up really quickly. Basil likes a little bit of extra heat as well. And yeah, so far I'm off to a good start. I'm trying to keep the numbers of the things that I seed on the slightly more conservative side. You know, I'm planting more than I will need for sure for my garden, but I'm trying not to go super crazy with it. And that just kind of affords me a couple of extras to maybe fail on something doesn't survive, maybe I've got an extra, or you know, last year I sold some of mine to some friends and stuff like that needed some extra ones. But there's nothing wrong with trying it out. If it doesn't work, reseeding it again if you don't have a ton of space. I've got a big like baker's rack that I got from some person I bought just secondhand, and it's kind of working to sort of contain and support all my things, so it's not scattered all over my dining room quite as crazy as it normally is. It's a little bit more neat and contained this year, but this is just something that's been building little by little. Like, okay, I find that thing. I always try and buy things secondhand if that's possible. Really, why not, right? There's so many people out there selling so many things. I'd rather give my money to them, save myself some money, they get it, and hopefully saving some things from going to the landfill and stuff like that. So yeah, get creative with the things that you're planting in. Go to secondhand stores, put wanted ads online, save your recycling stuff, pop bottles, milk jugs, toilet paper rolls, egg cartons. I've got, like, this is that raspberry container. There's so many good things that you can use that you don't have to have. Just note that, like, the smaller that you go with, like, egg cartons are a really popular one because we always have tons of those guys, the nice like cardboard ones. Those ones are like, they're a little bit harder when you get into like the like papery type stuff, or those little peat pellets. They're a little bit harder to keep those guys consistently moist. So just as long as you're aware of that and you're checking, morning and night and stuff, and just making sure you've got a good even moisture, not too much, obviously not letting things dry out. The egg cartons are quite small, so your seedlings probably sooner rather than later, you're gonna have to kind of snip those guys apart and put them into whatever that next size pot is. They're not, like, the egg carton is not gonna get you probably all the way through till you can put it in the ground, especially if you're starting things with a couple months before you actually can put things in the ground. So those are just a few things that you probably want to keep in mind, depending on what you guys are using. But yeah, if you have questions, just drop them below. There is really, like, it's straightforward. You need some dirt, so you need some things to put it in, some moisture. We've all got, sinks with water coming out of them, luckily, and a little windowsill, table, whatever you need to do, and very likely you can get a good amount of stuff going inside your house and give you a little boost, little head start. Instead of buying a bunch of starter plants, a seed packet should last you more than likely quite a few years instead of paying $5 for one starter plant, So that's kind of why I do it, because I have a lot of stuff that I require, and it is just far more beneficial for me to start from seed. I can control the whole process, and I love it that way. So have a really great night, guys, and I will talk to you again soon.